I know you may still be hurting at this moment, but you know what? 1 week of preseason is in the books, and this Wednesday marks not only the trip to Walsall, but the 1-month countdown until Premier League football returns. And with the two major tournaments over, Olympics notwithstanding, and the players starting to filter back, and by the way, I love this kit, but doesn't it remind you a little bit of 24/7 Services colors? Imitation is the sincerest form of flattery. But now we could start to look at Aston Villa's squad depth with a month to go before the season, and that depth was improved over the weekend with the rumoured capture of Amadou, don't call me Andre, Onana for a reported 50 million quid from Everton. Let's talk about that and some of the other areas of concern that may be addressed and all the other stuff as we count down to kickoff here on the Holy Trinity Show. Oh, it's so nice to have you back in the parlor, which has been a very quiet place of late. Early July is one of the periods in the calendar where there's not a lot going on and I can slip away with my family and have some fun excursions, especially to Vancouver Island, a place I feel so dearly about because that's where my family cabin is. I worked there for 12 years. It's also home to the provincial capital, Victoria, which is an awesome place, an iconic and buzzing inner harbor, very touristy, but fun for families. And one of the things we did on this trip was to take in Canada's version of the FA Cup. This is the semi-final first leg, which is also a BC derby between Pacific FC and the Vancouver Whitecaps. The winner goes on to the final. Whitecaps 1-0 winners on the day. But for me, if I can't get to the island at least once, it just simply isn't summer. You just leave it all behind on that ferry ride. And this is on the way home. And that dark patch you see on the right is Tawasin, where we live. Very convenient to be so close to the ferry terminal. It did feel like the last week or 10 days has been very quiet. And of course, that does have to do with the Euros and Copa America. And our players played some significant roles in those tournaments. We'll talk about that later, along with some of the other bits and pieces that seem to be picking up right now, as it feels like Aston Villa still has some significant transfer business left in it. But we have to start with the biggest news from the weekend, and arguably maybe the biggest news of the transfer window, and that's the rumoured capture of Amadou Onana from Everton for 50 million quid. Fabrizio Romano has already given it the here we go. Key numbers: he only turns 23 next month. 6'4". I repeat, 6'4". How many times have I said on this program, Aston Villa needs more physical presence in the middle of the park? And the stats bear that out. You know, last season we were second from bottom in aerial duel success. Do you know that Onana, across Europe's top 5 leagues, was the number 1 midfielder in aerial duels won? He took 3 out of every 4. That is how you use data to recruit and address weaknesses or anomalies in your squad. Onana's familiarity with international teammate Yuri Tielemans will certainly help with his integration, and he speaks 5 languages, so he'll be able to communicate with his teammates, although funny enough, Spanish isn't one of those languages. And I don't think he's a direct replacement for Douglas Luiz right now. And at 22-23, there is still going to be some refinement necessary here. But I'm not worried about that part because we have bought yet another really high potential player that's young over an established, experienced, older player. And over the last couple of seasons, his passing volume and accuracy have improved. He's always been very good at ball recoveries and interceptions, which show game IQ. And that's why clubs like Arsenal, Chelsea, Barcelona, and Bayern Munich, among others, were also in the chase for this player. At 22, he's not the kind of progressive passer that Douglas Luiz was yet, and certainly he doesn't arrive late to score a ton of goals yet. But I think what we're getting him for is a number of things. First of all, his tackles, his ground duels, and his aerial duels. Obviously, his stature, his ability to close down and defend fast with that long and rangy stride of his. And how nice is it to have somebody arrive at the back post who's 6'4" or who can latch onto a corner now and again. Yes, he does give fouls away, and he's not a 1v1 take-on type dribbler, but that did improve in the Euros. 90% pass completion. He did have a number of successful take-ons and was willing to go forward, and I believe by being surrounded by better players, as he was in that tournament, and having one of the best teachers in the world in Unai Emery, all those things are going to improve. Now, one potential consequence of bringing in a $50 million player like this is that I believe it increases the likelihood that we're going to have to ship out some money at some point before the season kicks off. And we know the names of players that might be on that list because they're high earners, like Lucas Digne and Diego Carlos, and both those players were signed by the previous regime. But this Moussa Diaby to the Middle East rumor that has been gaining steam over the last week or so has gone from ridiculous and unlikely to possible in a very short period of time. Saudi Pro League links to Moussa Diaby were already around last year, but now that Laurent Blanc is calling the shots at Al Ittihad and Karim Benzema is probably helping to recruit as well, this seems like there is some meat to the story, and Al Nassr is also apparently interested in Diaby, which is a good thing. Now, I'm a little bit conflicted here because there's no way that Moussa Diaby wouldn't have gotten better this year having one season of Premier League football under his belt. It's hard to adapt at times to the league, and he had the role as the number 10-ish kind of guy, which Unai Emery saw, and obviously he admires this player. But it is weird to potentially abandon a record signing after just one season. But as I've said on this show before, sometimes fate and opportunity extends its hand with a $70 million rumored package. And now all of a sudden you could wipe off a big salary from the books, not to mention the amortized payments owed to Bayer Leverkusen over the next 4 years, which gives us the flexibility of going and addressing other needs in the squad. Not to mention that Emi Buendia and Morgan Rogers are now fit again and can happily play in that number 10 role, as can John McGinn and Yuri Tielemans, who looked very comfortable playing in behind Ollie Watkins a few times last season. I wonder if one of the things that will influence this decision is just how great Morgan Rogers became as the season wore on, and he likes playing in that role. He's big and physical. He has the ability to come and score. He could set up his teammates. He's very technical. And we've also been linked to a lot of other players in that position. Pedro Gonçalves, João Felix even, and of course Alex Baena. Those players, though, come as far more well-defined and established number 10s, whereas Moussa Diaby was kind of sold on that vision by Unai Emery, despite having played most of his time at Bayer Leverkusen on the right-hand side of the park. And, you know, by selling him now to the Saudi Pro League way over there, you don't really have to worry about what happens to him and whether he goes on and becomes this, that, or the other. Now, if that club sells Diaby to, say, Newcastle next year, we may rethink this whole thing. But if you're Diaby, does this move make any sense? Like going to the 68th ranked league in the world. It only makes sense from one aspect, and that's this. He helped us achieve a Champions League berth. Don't you think he'd want to actually take part in that now? And what about his international aspirations? Wouldn't that take kind of a hit going to the Middle East? I honestly never thought it would come to a bid, but now that it has, and with the Onana capture, I could see this being a real possibility. And if you asked me who I would choose if you had to, make some money on a sale between Diaby and, say, Jacob Ramsey, well, I would always take the younger player, especially because he's one of our own. The reacquisition of Jaden Philogene Bidace. Or is it just Jaden Philogene now? Every time I say that, I feel like I'm just saying Trinidad. Anyway, we youthen our squad again with another high potential player that we kind of already know. We also quicken the squad on average and at a very reasonable ticket of just 13 million quid. And he's happy and comfortable playing on both flanks. And this is where the nous of Amanchi really comes into play, because that was a shrewd inclusion to have a buyback clause in that contract. Now, if you recall last year, I was absolutely shocked that Philogene did not stick with the first team given the preseason that he had. And apparently, Unai Emery was also shocked by what he had in this player. But you know what? Aston Villa did what was best for him at the time, offering him development via valuable game minutes with the Tigers. And this buyback clause was absolutely brilliant for us. It was like an insurance policy. Terrible for Ipswich and Everton, and even worse for Hull City, because they basically lost money on the deal. Ironically, and in hindsight, had Jaden stuck around with us, Emi Buendia was injured on the second to last day of preseason, and Jacob Ramsey had a tough time getting back into the squad and ever really getting up to full fitness. But Philogene would still not have had the kind of experience and meaningful minutes that he did have at Hull City, because he had a fantastic year in the championship, scoring arguably one of the best goals in the world. I mean, this should be a Pushkas nominee. So again, I highly commend Monchi and Unai Emery, because they saw enough and believed in this player enough to include the buyback option in his contract. Will we look back on that one day? Now, it does appear like Villa is kind of stockpiling players who prefer to play on that left-hand side when you consider Jacob Ramsey, Emi Buendia, Morgan Rogers, Illing Jr., Dobbin, Philogene. But at 13 million, with apparently even Barcelona sniffing around, I'll take that with a grain of salt, this is a no-brainer. And as we know, Philogene can also play just as effectively on his natural right-hand side, which Professor Unai will enjoy, because after Leon Bailey, who really is the next one up in that position? Now, while I'm flouncing around the Pacific Northwest with my family, Paul Hansaker and the 24/7 Services crew are all over the country doing various jobs from residential to industrial. This is Bob, Holy Trinity show viewer. Thanks for watching and using 24/7 Services, Bob. He just had a paint and paper job for Jay. And paper's in, by the way. Paper's very in. Jay's been busy with his brush. Look at this garage, or as you say, garage, door. Jay's chosen this color. Again, very 24/7 Services-like, but look at how this garage door pops. I mean, if you're having a party, all you have to say to your guests is, "We're the one with the electric green garage door." But that's just the fun and fluffy stuff. This is the reactive industrial stuff, the emergency type calls. In this particular case, a loading bay damaged. I guess the little camera in the back of the truck wasn't working that day, or my missus was driving. Anyway, the team had to come there first, repair the bay, but then they had to put in a protective pole. And there are codes and standards for all this stuff. And Paul and his team, they just know what to do. And they had to do it quickly, because every day that bay is out of commission, that company's losing money. Now, I know this show has a lot of business owners and entrepreneurs. This is the kind of stuff that you need to get right the first time. So if there is an emergency, go to the website. And if you can't get there fast enough, you'll always find the numbers in the description of these videos. On to other developments since we last spoke, and although England fell short, the Ollie Watkins goal in the semi-final was some kind of moment. Now, you know me, I love this man beyond just the fact that he's an Aston Villa striker. I love how he conducts himself, his humility, his work ethic, all of it. And this was a moment almost like Marco Tardelli in '82, only it was the semifinal and not the final, but you see so much in his eyes. His eyes tell such a story. It's joy, it's emotion, it's shock, it's the accumulation of all the work he put in last year and in his career at Weston-super-Mare, Hi Billy, Exeter, Brentford, Villa. It all just came bubbling up in a beautiful 1 second. We have seen Ollie Watkins score that goal at least 3 times last season, for sure at Chelsea and at Fulham. And when he was standing on the sideline talking to Cole Palmer just before they came on, he said, "Find me. We're going to end this game right now." And a classic Ollie Watkins penetrating run, good reception, and then he just calibrates his body to set for the shot. It's sharp and concise, boom, through the legs, bottom corner. What a moment. And I'd like to personally apologize to everybody else in that hotel who I jump scared because of my shriek. I feel like not getting the job done with his country is only going to make him work that much harder. And during these next couple of weeks off, as he sort of reflects on the tournament and unwinds and gets some time off, could looking back on this actually inspire him to crack on and improve from last season? I think it will, because this is a guy who is so dedicated to his profession. He realizes the window to win things is only so small. And think about the reception he's going to get at Villa Park or all grounds around the country this coming season. And for both Watkins and Konsa, they get to make meaningful contributions to another memorable England run to a final, but without playing so much that they're now going to be shattered and spent for the next couple of weeks. And without playing, do you know what happens? You are hungry for more and want to prove that you can be counted on more. I felt the same way for Alex Baena at Spain, because he had even less time for them, but still, got to be part of that whole experience. And he's going to want to prove that he deserves more time. Emi Martinez was leaned upon heavily, of course, by Argentina. He demands it, and for good reason. He's won his 3rd major trophy in a row, all the while racking up more clean sheets. I mean, this is a habit now. Clean sheeting teams in big games and winning trophies. Slightly awkward situation that Villa forced him out of the Argentina Olympic team, but you know what? It's the right decision. If only just for rest. You cannot play year-round, and he needs to be with his teammates and the team that pays him as we get closer to the start of the Premier League season. I did find it coincidental, maybe, that his agent came out and revealed how Emi Martinez was that close to joining Manchester United last year, only for Erik ten Hag to say no. Is that coincidental to you? Sort of feels like it's a shot across the Villa bow, as if to say, my client calls the shots. He's the best goalkeeper in the world. We have finally and mercifully terminated Callum Chambers' contract, as he's now off to Cardiff City. I thought for sure he'd leap at the chance for meaningful regular football in the Championship, when apparently he had several offers at the deadline last year. Lots of mutual respect between Chambers and Unai Emery, but he has to rebuild his career now. He has to prove to himself and everybody else that he is capable of meaningful involvement week in and week out. And I think it's just a matter of time now, with the one guy left, Courtney Haas, waiting for that call to go see HR. Well, little Phil is off to his boyhood club, but still on our books, sadly, because according to profit and sustainability rules, it's actually cheaper to loan him to Vasco da Gama rather than buying him out permanently. And what this tells us is the decision to permanently sign Phil at the end of the 21-22 season was a really bad one, both from a footballing and financial perspective. And there's my weekly jab at Christian Purslow. As I predicted, and you didn't need to be Nostradamus to see this one coming, but Alicia Lehmann is joining her Dougie at Juventus. What I didn't see, though, was a $12 million transfer fee. Now, that seems really good and fair for her, both for her footballing side and also her profile. So this whole connection between Villa and Juventus and this deal really does feel like it satisfied a lot of issues, and that it was a win-win-win-win for everybody. And it looks like Villa already spent some of that money on England and Brighton winger Katie Robinson. What I did not know until very recently was that Nassif Sawiris is the chairman of the Agnelli family holdings company Exor NV, which happens to be the largest shareholder of Juventus. There are no coincidences. And what this tells me is that this Douglas Luiz deal was probably consummated a long time ago. And these are the kinds of things that you have to do to work around the arcane profit and sustainability rules that are designed to make Jim Ratcliffe's cartel happy. And I also think part of this was to keep Louise away from a direct competitor like, say, Arsenal. There is now speculation that one of the Milan teams is joining West Ham in the pursuit of John Duran, and who knows where Chelsea is at the moment. Duran has played but 13 minutes for Colombia at the Copa America, and now that that tournament is over, I think that this will advance. But he's not coming back to Villa again. They need to get as much money as possible, and the more bidders, the merrier. So I've put together this infographic that shows the squad depth as of today, built around Unai Emery's preferred 4-4-2, 4-4-1-1, 4-2-3-1, 4-3-3, 3-5-2. You know how it works. It's very fluid. You get the idea with the positions here. And our squad, for me, is being built around three core players: Emi Martinez, John McGinn, and Ollie Watkins, players that I would classify as world class, all either in or approaching their 30s. I could see these players being moved on in the near future for big money, but right now they want to win. This is our leadership spine that we're building around. The next group will replace this group. That includes Ezri Konsa, who can play both right center back and right fullback, Torres, Ramsey. I'm putting Diaby in there for now, but I'd also include Rodgers and Onana, Matson, Cash, Kamara when he's fit, plus Tielemans and even Barkley, even though he's on the downside of his career. This is now rounding into our wider core of players. The next group, it's unclear about the near or long-term future of, like Buendia, Dean, Moreno, Mings, Olsen, and Carlos. These players can absolutely serve a purpose and do a job. It's just not certain as to how much they'll have to do with us over the coming couple of seasons. But it's the next group that's really exciting. The young guns, the ones that keep these players fit and honest, and the ones that will push these players. Guys like Baranachea, Illing Jr., Archer, who may move on, Dobbin, who can play a number of positions, Philogene, and Nedeljkovic plus Gauchi. And I guess when we talk about what we still need, let's start with Gauchi. Is Gauchi ready to back up Martinez? He's made some progress, but we were linked to a Brazilian goalkeeper earlier this summer. Is goalkeeper one of the areas we need to address? Obviously, if Ollie Watkins gets hurt, we're so we have to find somebody who can play with or instead of Ollie Watkins. And although I'm not a Cash basher, he's been good for us. He's provided good moments with goals and interventions. The right back position for a long time is something that needs to be upgradable. I think Unai Emery is going to know very quickly whether Nedeljkovic is going to step into the squad right away or after a loan spell. There's also this little patch of grass just above the Torres sticker where Mario Hermoso would fit in nicely. It's a player that both Monchi and Emery have admired for a long time, and we've been linked to him for a while. A very versatile player who could play left center back or left back and even sometimes left midfield. When I look at all those 28 players laid out that way, we know that probably 3, if not more, are going to move on, and a couple will likely come back the other way. But what we're doing is something that I've been craving for ages, and that is long-term succession planning. I talked about Watkins, McGinn, and Martinez maybe moving on one day for big dollars. We have to plan for that well in advance, like 2 years in advance. And that's what I see evolving with our club. And you can only do that when your manager is locked down until 2029, like ours is. And when your manager is in lockstep with the sporting director who can go out and get the ingredients that you've identified we need, well, then what you have, my friend, is a strategic football club. And not a lot of clubs around us are acting this way. Chelsea certainly aren't. Manchester United haven't, but that may change now. Newcastle, they lost a pretty important person in that process. So we're lucky that we've got a head start and we've got stability. And that's all that us fans can ask for. That's it for now. But of course, Wednesday marks the 1-month countdown to opening day in the Premier League. And it also marks one of the staple events in our calendar now. The trip down the road to the Bescot to play at Walsall, which is always kind of fun. And I think I'll share my thoughts on that game along with the game in Slovakia because, let's be honest, these games are strictly fitness exercises where the boss will try to get 45 minutes to as many players as possible. Until then, unless there's some other huge news, be well, and as always, up the mighty Villa.